afternoon and good day, everyone. Good evening for those joining in from Australia and other places, which is already seen the sunrise as we get to the end of the day here. I'm here with my great friend and a fellow cyber industry professional and expert in what he does, and kind at heart, and a really great gentleman, Brian Hurd. As always, offered us his kind and generous time to learn more, and every time we meet, we get to do so. So, Brian, welcome to the Cyber Talent Week, almost concluding the Western Conference. Going coast to coast. So this would be a fantastic way to kind of wrap up this day. We have one more to go, but pretty much there for the day.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for taking time out of your day to support the Cyber Futures Foundation.
Thank you, Brian. Let me give you a little bit of context for those joining us online and will be listening to us offline later. Cybersecurity is a vast domain, and in this space we see a broad array of technical, business, legal, policy, and several functions that combine to come together to protect the digital assets that we have, whether connected or not, and more they are connected. So the cyberspace and the digital transformation kind of come together, and we are able to do more. We are able to have a more successful and then more meaningful lives, more and meaningful engagements, hopefully a lot more that we could do without being connected. Though pandemic has brought us to this digital connection, and then the yearning for getting physical is located together is more. But we have been at the cusp of, I would say, a massive digital transformation over the last couple of years. Being able to run organizations digitally, being able to learn digitally, being able to transact, even have families times together digitally, and that brought us to a place where we have to address the security more than ever before. Not just that, if that were pandemic was not enough, in the recent times, the conflicts at different regions, and especially those that are in the eastern, in the Russia-Ukraine situation, all that has accelerated the whole cyber threats landscape and the dynamic environment that it brings with. While this is very much focused on the cyber talent aspect, I think it's important to provide the background behind this, right? We are in a shields up state now. Every cyber professional or practitioner worth their salt is responding to some incident or preparing for one, and there is just not enough time or bandwidth in our day to do this. So I appreciate his team even more, giving him the time to come join us, and also personally doing this on his own time. So Brian, let me give a little of context how we want to position this. I believe the way we are looking at individual individual functions and domains and expertise within cyber has to come from the broader understanding of what cyber is and how cybersecurity industry performs, and how the business of cyber works, and eventually how do we protect it. However, you are in a very interesting position, especially with the particular function of cyber incident responders, as reacting to things, right? But that is what people typically see who are not prepared for it. So there is a preventative function as well, and we will try to unravel some of that and also give directions and guidance to people who are looking to become cyber responders, which I say stormtroopers, firefighters, paratroopers. You call it by many names, but incident response is a very, very significant function, and is becoming more, especially with the environment around us. So Brian, over to you to give a little bit of background of your profession and your experience coming to the leadership state that you are, and then we'll go and bring up the talent journey.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And again, my name is Brian Hurd. Currently, I'm the Managing Director, Chief Office for Strauss Freeburg, which was acquired by Aon, the global insurance company. Before that, I was the Chief of Cybercrime Intelligence for Microsoft at the Digital Crimes Unit. Prior to that, in charge of the U.S. watch listings identity layer for the no-fly list, as many as you know it. And way back 30 years ago, when I was a lot younger, founded the cyber counter-espionage program for NCIS before it was the TV show, as you all know it as today. So the one thing when Val and I were talking about this, about people saying, well, what's the formula to be a CISO, to be in charge of the cyber smoke jumpers or incident responders or whatever paratrooper name that you all like. And the great news for each of you, there is no one path. There is no one answer. The answer is that I've seen 5, 6, 7 different ways to get to various positions, but all of them have one thing in common. The person's well-rounded. Being an expert in technology will get you only so far if you can't articulate the budget, the emergency, and the need for strategy. And similarly, I found that technical people, sometimes in crisis management, are not, they have to have that fireman's calm at showing up at a fire. There's 2 types of managers, and each of you in your head will picture these 2 types. When there's a crisis, there's a fire. One type of manager brings water and calms things down. The other one throws gasoline on it and runs in a circle. So make sure you're that first part, not the second part. And I'll say that a lot of times it's the ability to take your educational experience in psychology, diplomacy, and project management, and above all, data visualization, and apply those wherever you are, and you will rise in those ranks. So Val, I know you have a couple of questions that came from the community or things to cover. Absolutely glad to do it. And my final bit is, yeah, I run mega breaches all over the world. We've been shields up in the cyber community for going on 30 years now. So while there is a current conflict or two, Val and I have been standing watch on the cyber wall for forever. So it's a daily onslaught for all of you in the community. Even if it's on the front page of the Washington Post, it's still every day for us. So thanks again for taking this time out.
That is right, Brian, and I couldn't agree more that we have been on the watch, and I think that watch just continues. It's just other people getting to know that we have to watch. Well, interestingly, this is something that comes up. Especially cyber incident response typically comes up when an incident happens, and that's how people identify. Brian, could you just help us to kind of break down this profession in terms of the preventative side and the reactive side? I think that will be very helpful.
So a lot of you, if you aspire to the protect, detect, restore, respond that NIST was designed over the years, I think Val was one of the authors of it, or I credited him with being one. On the protect side, it's about project management and picking a framework. NIST, ISO, HIPAA, SOX, compliance, and other things. Now, it's not just about checking the box on an audit. It's about having the skills to look at the waterfront of the organization and pick those frameworks, those North Stars that allow you to build a program, or else you will run around fixing issue after issue, but not in a systemic and sustainable way. So on the proactive side, a lot of times, the very first thing is truly understanding the business. Are you a manufacturer? Do you have a lot of OT, IoT? Do you have a pure IT environment? What are you processing in that environment? Consulting records, legal documents, PII, PHI. From understanding those components, you can then inform picking a framework and then regimenting a set of programs, evaluations, and metrics to help you put the best fire detectors, smoke detectors, sprinkler systems, fire doors, or watertight compartments. I'm former Navy, so I like ship analogies, but choose your adventure. That allows you to select the right gear to avoid issues at that shop. Then the question becomes, move from protect to detect. What are you seeing? If you're not getting any reports, you're not set up right. There's a ton of false positives. You have to meter those out. And then there's issues you deal with every day. So in that environment, a lot of the times it's looking at the data architecture. looking at the triggers, looking at the alerts, looking at data visualization of what's being reported, even if it's not a problem, and knowing that problems will bubble up when they should. I'd say in that detect phase, pen testing. Are you doing external, internal, looking at the app code, not only for security fragility, but IP ownership and other problems that even if it's not a security problem, could still down your organization? Do you know what good code looks like? Do you have a secure software development lifecycle? Do you test it? Those kind of things. And also in the detect, are you doing your tabletops? Are you testing? Are you training? One of the things you always learn in no matter what profession, in a time of stress, you will go to your training. If your training was crap, you will behave badly in battle or in sports. But if you had the right drills and you do them often enough, you'll sink your basket, hit your field goal, or whatever it is that you practice every day in your organization. And the protect, detect, respond is, what do you have when the fire bell goes off? Do you have people that can not only technically respond, but logically understand the roles of outside counsel and other things, which Val will talk about in a future question, I know. And then recovery. You're back to rebuilding the house that just burnt down or just got flooded. Are you going to rebuild back the same way, or are you going to do something different? How much does insurance cover or not? Whose money are you going to use to rebuild? Those skills, again, are right back around to project management more than often they are the technology to be able to roll up your sleeves and do it.
No, that's kind of that was probably what I was trying to on. So great job there in terms of giving the broadest lens that you can think of in terms of its response, because it's not just after the fact, after something happens. It's all surrounding the entire framework and making sure that you know when something has happened, how can you address this, because it's inevitable. Something's going to happen. You're going to uncover issues and incidents. But how do you respond to it is absolutely determined by the entire framework, not just that step after it. If you are calling Brian after the fact, that means you got your homework done not right. But make sure that even if you're done homework right, one part is calling Brian and his team, right?
Well, and the other thing is, it's often said in the CISO community, and Val and I have talked about this before, having an incident is not the thing that destroys your career. Being unable to cope with one is. All of us, no matter what your business, you will face cyber incidents. It's not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's just a fact. In your lifetime, you will be in a house fire cyber-wise. It's how you respond calmly, coolly to get the right things done. And all of you have that in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, for those that have been with us through this whole session, you can hear this reverberate right across sessions, that you have to be prepared. And cyber is not only a tech career, but also the human aspects, the soft skills definitely play into it. And leadership and skills are expected at every level. You can't sit back and ask and wait for orders, right? You need to engage, you need to proactively learn, and you have to grow. So talking about that and learning and growing, Brian, where does someone who wants to be an incident responder get a start? For firefighters, you can walk up to probably the local fire station and say, hey, I'm going to be a volunteer, right? And you pass some checks and bounds, and then you become a volunteer if you're qualified or eligible. Where does that look for an incident responder in cyber?
Gotcha. So there's a lot. The great news is, back, Val, when you and I started, and I'm going to age both of us, but me a little bit more, the web didn't exist yet. There was no Google. we were doing things on ARPANET and DARPANET, or at least I was. Val's a little younger, or at least looks younger. So the thing I would say is, start by looking in your industry at the ISACs and what they say for incident response and what the plans are offered by CISA. Read through the template incident response plans. Figure out what your role would be in it. For those of you in universities, you have a cyber range somewhere near you at the university or state level. You can pick and choose the working papers or thesis papers that you do in your educational programs, regardless of whether you're a college kid, at getting your master's. I went back and got my MBA at one point when I got bored of getting all the certifications. We'll talk about those in a sec. So you lead from where you are is something Val and I have been taught many times in our career. You show your organization, besides doing your day job, you're looking at these other things in the organization and offering your time and energy to it, either in your own company or by donating some of your time or seeing what the local university or state level allows. Taking that first job at a company that does it, maybe starting out as a pen tester and working your way into incident response, or coming in as a project manager and then taking projects again and again that are security related to get your time in the profession. A lot of times it's more important to get in an organization at the junior parts of your career. Get in the right company and you can move around, as opposed to trying to find that perfect job that probably they're going to say you need 5 years experience to get. So there's always a lot of power once you're in either a government organization or in a commercial organization to go make friends and then lateral around. Think about that as you look at maybe not your next job, but the job you want 3 jobs from now, and then engineer 1 or 2 paths to get there. And certifications, ton of them. CISSP, CCCI, CCFT, SNSCP, CISA, CISM, CCCI, yeah, a bunch. So I have like 8 certifications. I got bored when got an MBA. So I wouldn't recommend my path. I don't need half those certifications, but they were fun to get.
You took the test, passed, and then went to study.
Yeah, it's some of them. I mean, when you've been in the community as long as some of us have, again, dating myself, those things are kind of important in the junior parts of your career. If you want to know which certifications are important to you, look at the person who has your dream job and then the person under them and figure out what certifications they have, because those are the ones that are probably important to that profession.
Yeah. No, and I think it's we really didn't have that that privilege earlier or the access to those. I think now we can go up LinkedIn. People actually look for mentors and mentees, and those relationships fairly get established fairly quickly. Right? The cybersecurity profession is about giving more than anything else. I haven't seen any other profession, probably medical and few others, education, of course. But cybersecurity professionals really want to stretch their time to give more time to other people. So I think you have a great opportunity, as Brian, you mentioned, you look at the second person where you reach out and they'll be able to, connect with you. So no, great clues. How about, if you had to go and say I'm an entry-level person, I got this job. What are the first, tasks do you think they would get? And I think you have to look deep down in your organizations to see where could they be most utilizing their time, and if they can move around as few other within your organization, move around in the incident response function.
And there are a lot of for those of you transitioning out of the military, for those of you coming to your first job, there are a lot of apprenticeship programs or a lot of transition programs at many companies around the nation, and government agencies as well. I got my start in the military and government, and it was just an amazing, amazing time. I was given missions and abilities well beyond, my age, way early. And it was quite an honor. So I got a lot of experience that I never anticipated. I could not, if you asked me to plot my career from here to there, I couldn't have done it. And I still can't, because I'm not even sure where I'm going next. I'm going to have fun there, but I don't know what it is. Yeah. The thing I would say is, a lot of those first jobs, you're going to be doing a lot of log analysis or maybe sitting in a watch center. But the thing is, the time you get there, if there's not an emergency going, you can be doing other things that help the company. You got to be on their time, of course, a bit, or the government's time. But when I was sitting on the terrorism watch, I helped design the cyber counterespionage program. And they were so happy with it. They said, we'll find somebody else to do what we hired you to do. You go do what we should have hired you to do. But you have to rock your day job first.
Yeah.
You have to, and that's the thing. There's a little bit of a buy-in of personal time and energy where you have to nail your day job first and they have to be happy. Then you can really take it where you want it to go.
Yeah.
And you earn their trust and their confidence, and they may give you new opportunities to expand and succeed. And talk to your friends that are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you in what you think your career is. Are they happy? I've had friends that got promoted so high they became unhappy in the profession. They just wanted to work on hard drives. And if that's you, don't let them promote you above the level of manager. But if you want to be a manager and above, you're often not going to be the smartest technician on the team.
You have other
The
skills,
leader.
though. I think
Yeah.
that's what is interesting about, I think, the cyber career journey, right? Because you can move up, you can be individual contributors, you can be specialist in policy,
Yeah.
and you can be doing nothing technical with hands on the keyboard. You can still move mountains just by lifting your pen or your keyboard. Yeah.
And it is. A
So how
lot
much
of times teams are made stronger by somebody who's not in charge as much as they have a good plan to let other people do amazing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, so we talked about the career journey, right? Entry level, we talked about some of those initial tasks and learnings, where initiative comes, your own initiative comes in. You have to learn on your own time. You have to earn the time to learn, right? So that
Yeah.
you do your day job really well. So great nuggets of kind of guidance there. Where do you think you start taking kind of ownership and initiative? Because all organizations are made differently. Typically, some organizations have more, culture of people owning things. Some are a little bit more, drilled down on the top. Some, of course, military have been there, so which is completely different dimension. But where do you think the managerial and leadership skills come in? And you can learn under someone. You can also be coached and trained to become good managers. Of course, leadership is innate, something that you have to cultivate on your own, right? What are your thoughts on that, the transition to leadership and management?
I think one of the things I found was that in my earlier career, I saw some of the most amazing examples of leadership that I've taken with me throughout my career. I've also seen things I promised myself I will never let happen in my presence or never allow myself to say. So when you look at any engagement with people in your organization or with leaders, look at it as a way of marking the leader you're going to be by taking the good qualities and making sure you don't fall into the bad ones. So even, and there were a couple for all of us, the negative interactions of something you tried to do, even if you had the best of intent, the person looked at it wrong. Okay, how do you fix that so it's not misperceived next time? They thought you were trying to take their job instead of mentor with them. They thought you were trying to take over instead of be a great team player. Now, if you weren't trying to be a great team player, that's yours to own. But if you were being above board, then that's theirs. I would also say, and I'll say this about the FBI. One, I love the FBI. Two, I worked with them a whole lot. So it's like, I love my brother too, but we still argue once in a while. The first couple times at NCIS, I did things with the FBI. They would take the information and data and never tell me anything back. Then the fourth time that that we were going to do something, I just sat back for a bit and they came and said, well, can you help us with this one? Because the first three went well. They just never told me. So not every time you do something and put something in a cyber world karmically to somebody else, you're not always going to get instant gratification, but you know you did the right thing. Keep doing that. People will know your brand and they will seek you out over time. But it's not every time you knock it out of the park, you're not going to see something on the scoreboard. And it's a different way of thinking.
Very true. And I think that's where the giving culture of cybersecurity come and the successful leaders emerge from there. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that kind of brings a very real feel for it, right? Especially with when you have an incident, and I think some of us probably deal with the law enforcement. This is more than others, and in this case, that's so true, because most of them can tell us back what's happening or what they did with it, but you may realize after 3-5 years after long investigation, someone you were really after a case, right? That is actually the holy grail. I think I really get or like that thrill, like this happened and we told them like how many years back, and it takes that much of effort to get there, right? So I think that window is also going, keep going down and down, because
Absolutely.
of the ability for us to now nail down the data attribution and all that stuff. Great.
I think a lot of times in those major incidents, people who haven't been through a bunch don't understand or may not appreciate the role of the outside counsel, the lawyers, your general counsel's outside law firm, and others to coordinate with law enforcement to help the organization through a major enterprise event. So those kind of things, it's also, as you see some of these things and you get to be in the room with these, seeing not only how you're acting, what's the CEO doing, what's the CFO doing, and others, and understanding how to make them successful. One of the top things I'll tell you is executives like information to make decisions. They don't like to be told what decision to make.
Yeah.
And the other analogy I often use, and you talked about it, I always say, and I don't know the CEO of Brinks at all. I don't know if it's male or female or whatever. However, the CEO of Brinks doesn't fix engines in the trucks. They run a multi-billion-dollar global organization to secure things. Don't ever try and teach a CEO how a firewall works, no more than you try and teach a general how to fire a round out of a tank. It's not what they do. You have to distill up, not water down, distill up information so they can make strategic decisions. And understanding what to brief and not to brief is one of the biggest parts of the job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that brings us to that level, right? And I think we talked about the career progression of each individual trying to make it to the top level of a cyber incident leader, or at this level. From a management to leadership, I think there is a very vague transition, but it just happens all of a sudden, right? Where you have to make those decisions, and what to tell, what to not tell, and I can probably cannot overemphasize the whole role of outside counsel versus those that have done this much before, right? Because it's not just responding to a cyber incident, but the regulatory requirements that you may have, the fiduciary responsibility of sharing and not sharing, and who to share at what point. It makes a lot of sense. You cannot unwind many of these. You said something, you cannot take it back, and all of this. Even in investigations, you have forensic data that the custody of forensic data and the challenges related to it, I think becomes mind-boggling. Are there any specific resources at a leadership level when you start pointing to them? I mean, does Aon, Straws provide any resources that we can point out our kind of viewers to?
Yeah, so for those at the enterprise level or in boardrooms who are visiting us today, yeah, we do a bunch of that. We do I'm flying to various places, do the executive tabletops for trillion-dollar companies or those that manage trillions of dollars in wealth. So we do the ransomware tabletops at the exec level or at the technical level. The technical tabletop, big thing to learn for us tech types. The tech type tabletop has nothing to do with the executive one. And you don't invite the executives to one, and you don't invite the techs to the other. It's a whole two different levels of running a battle. You have the tactical level in the engine room, and you have the stuff up on the bridge. And there's a one crossover, and that's usually the CISO or the director of cybersecurity. So in our organization, yes, we do a bunch of that prep and board level consulting and things like that. However, in general, in fact, let me look at for those in the leader side, the Professional Development Academy, PDA, offers and I'm looking over the certificate of it, a 14-week program about how you might want to step into the CISO role. There are other organizations like the CISSP is a great baseline certification that gives you the 14 areas in the core body of knowledge. Even if you never go get a CISSP, look at the table of contents of the book and at least read the table of contents once to know the 14 areas that you might want to know things about. Even if you don't want to get a certification, understand what the certification's core requirements are so you know whether you want to get it or not. I think the other lessons, there wasn't any of this when you and I started. There's whole graduate programs, certificate programs. Kid came to me like, I have a master's degree in incident response. I'm like, I've been doing it for 30 years. I don't have a master's degree in incident response.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing to show.
Pick and choose your programs well. They should be things that result, hopefully, in you making friends and making a network of companies that work with that program and value its graduates. And that's one of the questions I usually ask. Tell me where your graduates went. Where do they work now? Who hires them on the spot? Who calls you to get the new batch that are graduating? And that's the kind of things you should be interviewing those programs as much as they're interviewing you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think there's tons of resources. I mean, our company's one of them. A lot of great companies out there do that too. I want to be fair play in the CFF environment. But yeah, if there's
Of
an
course.
issue, give me a yell. But you know, Kevin Mandia made a great company too. So that's fine.
Yeah, now the brands and names changed, and I think there'll be more resources coming to that field.
Yeah.
So Brian, I'd like to wrap up this next few minutes. Just maybe highlights of some of the talking points that you would want us to consider if we had to put a section on incident response and providing this support to the overall industry, and there are some strategic bullet items that needs to be taken. What would your advice be? Something actionable that you can put as a national cybersecurity workforce strategy for incident response needs to include X, Y, Z.
Gotcha. So as you know, twice a year when humans fly, when there's not a pandemic, I fly over the George C. Marshall Center and talk to 100 different countries about how to do the global program. And a lot of times, some of those same themes you heard me say today, you have to pick a North Star. You have to look at your preparation and then how do you detect incidents? What are the roles in those incidents? But for those of you looking at how do you, for an individual level of how do you chart your career, one, chart 2 or 3 stars out and then realize you probably won't hit that third one. You'll hit a star on the side. You'll pick something better when you hit the second waypoint. Mentor, don't always go for $1 billion mentor. Find mentors on the ladder of a career you want. And the first question to ask them is, are you happy? And if they're not, maybe that's not the part of the career they wanted, but then you find out why they like or don't like their job. I say the following to every person that ever interviews with me, and there's been over 1,000 or more. I have a great job. You have a great resume. Don't try and fit yourself into a job you don't want. Like if this job doesn't make you want to get out of bed and work hard, it's not the job for you. Tell me what you want. I'll help you talk to that other part of the company. And a great deal of the time somebody goes, thanks, I'm applying for a job because I need one, but this wasn't the perfect job for me. I wish I could get one over in the other division. And I'll call the other person if the person's qualified. And I'll say, I got somebody who's going to love your division much more than mine. Find those mentors 5 years ahead of you, 5 years older than you, 10 years older. Then find the graybeards. But that's a way for you to mentor to where you need to be to make the right decisions. Because when Val and I started out, it was a little bit different of a career. I'm envious of what you all get to do. But pick people that are closer to your path too.
Very, very true. Now, I mean, it's not hunkering down into ISSA, week over week to find out, who has free time to do this or help us or guide it, right? No, I'm so fortunate that we are still here. We are able to share what we have with those that are going to join the industry and help us be more secure and protect our digital enterprise and the way of life that we all know. And Brian, thank you for being a great leader in this space and also contributing to this session today and the overall Cyber Talent Week with some really great insights, how to break into this career, how to grow in this career, and how to make this your own. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And again, thanks for everybody for taking time today. I know you didn't have a lot of it.
Excellent. Thank you. All right.